Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing a quick book review on The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. This is a book that's been on a lot of people's favorite books of 2023 lists, and I definitely can understand why. James McBride is an author that I've read before. I read The Good Lord Bird number of years ago now because it came out a little while ago, and I really enjoyed that book. James McBride has always been an author that I've kind of kept my eye on in terms of when his new books come out. I'm always intrigued by them. But first, the plot. Of course, I say that knowing that summarizing the plot of this book is not going to be very easy. So the book mainly takes place in this small town in Pennsylvania, and it starts off with the police finding a dead body, and that body is found in the 1970s, and then you flash back in time to, I believe, the 1930s in the same town, and you basically know that one of the people in the town is going to be the dead body that they found in the first chapter. And so that's kind of the starting off point. And so there is kind of this mystery that surrounds this whole book of who is this dead body? But that isn't really the plot of this book, because honestly, halfway through this book, I kind of forgot that whole thing happened. And it wasn't until I was in the last chapter when things started building to a certain point where I was like, oh, right, that's a thing that happened. So really what you're doing is you are following a wide cast of characters who all exist in this small town. The main characters you are following are this Jewish couple named Moshe and Chona, and they run the Heaven and Earth grocery store, which was in this predominantly Jewish neighborhood, but the Jewish residents have been moving out of this neighborhood and has been turning more and more into a predominantly black neighborhood. Moshe, or I'm just going to call him Moshe because that's how I called him in my head, he runs a number of the theaters in town and dance halls and things like that. And so he's been wanting to move out of the neighborhood to where all the other Jewish families are going, but Chona is very adamant about staying in this neighborhood. She is someone who has a lot of opinions and feelings and things like that. She has a strong sense of duty and charitable giving and things like that. She feels called to running the Heaven and Earth grocery store and, working with the people in her community and working with specifically people who are underprivileged and letting them do their best. She's very outspoken. She writes public opinion letters to the local newspaper and things like that, and is not afraid to say what she thinks is right, which personally I think is really fantastic. And so they're kind of the center of the story, but there is just this wide cast of characters of all these different people who exist in this little neighborhood and their relationships with each other and learning about their backgrounds and their lives. And so I'm gonna just stop it there, even though the plot synopsis goes further, because I feel personally I didn't read a lot about the plot before going into it, and so it felt like the reveals that happen or the plot progressions that happen felt really interesting to me, so I don't like giving away too much of the plot. But yeah, the reason why I said earlier that James McBride is an author that I always keep my eye on is because I really love the way that he builds out these worlds and characters. I feel when I read his books, the characters that you come across are just unlike anyone else that you've ever read about before, but also they feel fully real and fully realized. James McBride gives you so much information about every character. He provides you with background. He provides you with stories about their lives. He provides context of how they relate to the other people that you already know, as well as other people in town. He provides just so much that these characters are just fully realized in the best possible way. But I will also say that can sometimes feel a bit of a downside depending on how you read books, because I know for me, when I read one of his other books, Deacon King Kong, I didn't end up finishing it just because it felt too dense and I was getting lost within all of the characters and I couldn't quite figure out what was going on, and I was having a hard time following the plot. And again, that's probably a me thing more than anything else, because I do know a lot of people who love that book too. But I will say James McBride's books are dense in world building in a way that you don't typically see in contemporary fiction or historical fiction. But it's also something that feels really beautiful, because if you do end up committing to the book, it does feel you really get to know these characters and these people, and you feel somewhat committed to what was going on. The other really interesting thing about this book is that there is a lot of conversations without being overly preachy about like disabilities of various kinds. Chona, the main character, she has a physical disability and has a hard time walking sometimes and things like that. And there's some other characters who get introduced who also have like physical disabilities. One of the characters in here that plays a predominant role doesn't speak, and there are other characters that you meet that have like these other sort of either physical disabilities or something along those lines. And it's really interesting to read this book and to see sort of how these people are treated like people and not like a caricature just of their disability and things like that, which I found really great. James McBride, in his like notes at the end, talks about how he had this experience of volunteering at a camp specifically set up for kids who are disabled, and how he like came across someone who taught him basically how to treat these people like human beings, which is unfortunate that we have to say that we need to be like taught those things. But I think that a lot of times people who are disabled are seen as being lesser. And for example, one of the characters in here is deaf. He ends up losing his hearing because of an accident. And it's like after that point, people just like don't treat him like an intelligent human being, it seems like, because of that disability. And it's also really great to hear a character like Chona talking about her disability and like dealing with her disability, but being like very outspoken about like the way people are treated and stuff like that. But it like, again, doesn't come across as like preachy. Like it all feels very natural because all of these characters feel so fleshed out and real that it works. It like works so well as a book. It's like one of those books that, unlike, you know, Happiness Falls, which I read last month, it felt like a book that was like saying something about disability, while this book feels more like a story that just also features characters who have various disabilities. And like both, I'm not like putting judgment on one versus the other, but I do feel like this one is more rare and this one is also like a little bit harder to pull off, or at least from what I've seen. But yeah, I just feel like James McBride is such a wonderful author, and there's like a very clear reason why he's growing in popularity and things like that. And so if you're someone who's been wanting to pick up James McBride, I do feel like this would be a great place to start. But I would give you the encouragement that to like give it maybe a little bit longer than you typically would if you are the type of person like me who gives up on books, because I do feel like it takes a while for like the setting to be set and for all of the characters to be introduced. And so like for a lot of these early chapters, each chapter you're basically getting introduced to like new characters in new situations, and it can be hard to connect with books like that, or it can be hard for me to connect to books like that. But if you're willing to like, you know, commit to it, I do feel like it all pays off in the end. So overall, I would give this book like a 3.5 out of 5 stars, because I feel like the writing is phenomenal, the characters are phenomenal. The part that just like holds me back from fully loving this book is that the cast is so big that I never fully fall in love with the book, but I really enjoy the way that everything kind of layers together. And so it's like right on the edge of being a 4-star book. It's probably like a 3.75, honestly, because the threads that he is able to weave together to create the tapestry of this book is really well done. There's some like just excellent work being done with like plot and character development and things like that. And I can definitely see why so many people love this book. So yeah, those are my quick thoughts on The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read this book, what your thoughts were on it. Or if you have any questions, feel free to leave that down in the comment section as well. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.